What's going on, everybody? I'm Brandon from Walker's Woodworks. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be making a DIY barn door that you can make in a day or two, and all the materials you can go and get at your local Home Depot. Let's get to it. All right, so what we're starting out with here is all pine. I'm going to paint this, so I don't really care. If you're going to stain it, you may want to look into something like alder or something like that, or just use a pre-stain conditioner if you're going to stain it, because pine does tend to be a little blotchy when you stain it. The tongue and groove will be for the back panel, and then the common board will be for the front trim area, whatever you want to call it. This particular barn door is going to go in our bedroom, covering the closet opening. Whenever they put in the closet, they left like a really small header at the top, so there wasn't room for the hardware and everything to do a barn door. So what I actually had to do was extend the header down. I was going to put that in the video. I'll actually put an overlap of it right here so you guys can kind of see what I'm doing, but I'm no framer or drywall guy, so please don't judge too hard. But I had to get that done before I could do this. So if you are going to build a barn door yourself, make sure there's enough room above it for all the hardware and all that stuff. I want to start off by saying this is a DIY project. It's going to be a simple build. You could get fancy and do like floating panels with mortise and tenon joinery and all that stuff, but that's not what we're doing today. We're going to use simple tools, just a few basic boards, maybe the table saw, and just get a nice project done that you can do in a weekend. First thing I want to do, stop hitting stuff. First thing I want to do is get these all lined up and flip the way I want. Usually these tongue groove boards, at least these ones, have a rough side and a smooth side. So I want the smooth side to be the one I'm going to glue my trim to. So I just want to get it all kind of laid out. I've got all my boards laid out in dry fit here. Now my door is going to be 87 inches tall by 32 inches wide. Yours may be different depending on how big the opening is you're trying to cover. My opening is like 29.5 by I don't know how tall. It's less. It's shorter than the door I'm making, basically. And I also want to cut off the edges of these outside boards so that way they'll be flush instead of having the tongue and groove joinery showing, and it'll be flush with this, and it'll look a lot better that way. So I'm going to get a measurement. I'm going to mark where I want to cut it, and then make sure to mark these boards as the outside ones so you don't get them all mixed up. Actually, instead of trimming these first, I'm going to cut all these to a rough length, which is going to be longer than I actually want them, so I have some room to trim off. And then I can run these outside ones through the table saw, because I don't feel like running a 12-foot board through when I don't need to. This just has to be close. Doesn't have to be perfect, because like I said, I'm cutting off quite a bit more than I actually need. Now you might be saying, why are you using a circular saw to cut these instead of just taking the miter saw? It's so much faster. Well, that's true. But I wanted to test out this saw, for one. I also want to keep it a little bit more relatable for people who may not have a miter saw. And this is a good way to accurately cut with a circular saw. You just use a speed square, set it up to where your blade is going to cut on your line, and then follow the square. Nice straight line. So I got roughly 35.5 inches overall. So if I come in 1 3/4 inches on each side, that should give me 32 inches. So I'm going to measure that out and then cut it on the table saw. Now that I have all the boards for the back panel done and set aside, I'm going to focus on the frame that goes on the front. We're just going to go with a simple design on ours, a full rail across the top and the bottom, and then boards down the sides with one board in the center, so it'll be like a 2-panel door basically. I'm going to cut these all to length and then pocket hole the whole thing together to give it a nice base structure. So I got these two pieces for the top and bottom. Now I need to cut the pieces for the sides, which go between these. So I need to take the overall measurement, which is 87, and subtract whatever these two are together, which is 11. So 76 is what the sides need to be. So I'll get those cut, and then we can start putting pocket holes in and get these put together. Now I want to determine which side I want to face outward and drill the pocket holes on the opposite side. So that will be kind of sandwiched between the panel and this, so you won't see them. This side actually looks a little better, but it's got that knot hole. So I think I'll put that down. So I'll drill my pocket holes on this back side. So I'll put X's where I want to do that. And I'll drill them on the pieces that go up and down so they can screw up into the top and bottom pieces. Make sure the X is on the side I want to drill my holes. It's kind of a long board to use this one on. Actually, a clamp on one might be better for something this large, but this will work. Whenever you use pocket holes, you always want to make sure you clamp the pieces so they don't move around. A lot of times what will happen is when you screw it in, it'll push this piece away, and then when it comes up tight, it'll make it offset so it doesn't line up very good. And with this being so long, it'd be really hard to get a clamp this way. So I'm going to clamp down onto my bench, and that'll hold it in place so it won't move. At least that's what's supposed to happen. All right, so we got just under 21. So I'll cut that piece to go in the middle. Got my piece cut, bring the pocket hole jig back out. Are you helping? Get up here and do it. Get up here and help. Here. Go ahead. Not very helpful. All right, so I got my centerpiece cut here. Now all I gotta do is measure and find the center. And then you can line those center marks up with each other. Clamp it down. All right, so now we got our frame. Flip it over. So if I was gonna stain this, I would just go ahead and sand everything, put it together, and then just stain it and be done. But I'm actually gonna paint this. So I don't really want a lot of knot holes showing, and these boards aren't that bad, but the tongue and groove ones have quite a few knot holes. So what I'm gonna do is use some automotive Bondo, believe it or not. Yep, you heard that right. And fill all the knot holes because it paints really well. So I'm gonna get to doing that. So I got the front frame all done and a couple of these panel boards, but I figured I'd stop and maybe talk a little bit about doing this. I've used Bondo on cars a lot, so I just kind of eyeball the hardener, which is kind of what you have to do. And it's not super critical like epoxy. So you just get some filler on a piece of cardboard. That's all I ever use. And then with the hardener, just do about that much. There's no science. Just put a little. Because the more you put, the faster it's gonna react and start to harden as you're working. Trust me, it's not that fun. Get your hardener in there, mix it up until the gray turns pink, or depending on what filler you use, it could be green or yellow, but the normal Bondo is this red hardener, so it turns a pink. You wanna get all the streaks out of it. And I always mix up way too much, this is way too much. All I do is just use these cheap little plastic spreaders you can get and go through and just push it down into the cracks or holes or knot holes or whatever, and then scrape it off. You don't want to build up a lot because you can sand it off, but it's not that easy. It's kind of a pain, honestly. It gets pretty hard. So I just go through and fill in anything I see that I want to cover. Especially like stuff like this. That one warped a little bit overnight. The only downside of this is like with these. I don't know if you can see that very well, but on the joints, it's got these knot holes. I mean, there's nothing really you can do about that. See, look how way too much. Why? Why do I always do that every time? You guys remember back in my shop building videos on these walls, I actually used the same method. If we're being honest, I got lazy and stopped about halfway through though. I think I got everything pretty good. I come back after it's cured and sand everything, and then we can get it put together. I got to take a quick second and thank the sponsor of this video, which is Home Depot. I appreciate them very much for bringing me on as part of the Prospective program this year. They'll be sponsoring a few videos throughout the year, but for this project, they sent me the Ryobi 7-piece 1+ HP brushless toolkit. These tools are a lot stronger than the older Ryobi stuff. If you ever tried that, I highly suggest trying these out. I will leave a link to this kit down in the description below for you guys to check out. I've been using them around the shop and the house actually for like 3 weeks now, and I'm pretty impressed. I've been using the angle grinder for some automotive stuff, and it works really good with a cutoff wheel and a grinding disc. And if you pay attention to the time lapse, you'll see that I use the multi-tool on the drywall, which also worked great. So you guys check out that stuff. Thanks Home Depot for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the build. It's been a few hours, so the Bondo's all cured. I went ahead and sanded the back side of all these off camera, which was the rough side, just to give the paint something to adhere to a little bit better, and the surface is a little more smooth. And now I'm gonna go ahead and sand all the fronts and the frame, and then I think we're gonna paint before I assemble it, except for maybe the edges, because I may have to flush trim some stuff just to make it perfect, but we'll see what happens. I got everything ready for paint. Got the face frame here. I'm gonna paint that first. I got some cardboard down on my bench so I don't get paint on that because I hate that. And I also went around to all the sharp edges with a piece of sandpaper just by hand and broke over all those sharp edges so you don't get any splinters, and it's just a lot nicer to the touch. So we'll get this painted and then switch over and paint the whole back panel. All right, it's actually the next day, and I put a second coat on everything off camera. I figure you guys don't need to watch me paint the whole time. You get the idea. So now I got this flipped upside down. We can start with the edge board, put over here, and then I'll kind of just nail it down, put the tongue groove in the next one, kind of smack it down, make sure it stays, and then just continue across until we get to the other end. Remember that we did cut these a little bit longer than they need to be, so we'll have to flush trim everything, which is why I didn't paint the ends or the edges. Because if something comes out a little bit unsquare, that we can just trim and trim with a straight edge and circular saw and then repaint just that one edge and we'll be good to go. All right, so what I'm gonna do is use 18 gauge brad nailer and just start at one end, make sure it's lined up with this edge because we don't wanna really trim all 4 edges if we don't have to. And then I'm just gonna start. And then as I go, I'm gonna make sure this stays flush. And it's kind of sticking off down here, so as I go, I'll kind of pull this back and nail it, and that'll hopefully kind of pull it into place. I'm gonna put a lot of brad nails. But I don't want to put him all the way down on the edge because I'm gonna have to cut back with a router to do that slot, so keep him up a little bit. Make sure you put the right edge, or the right face, the right way. All right, we got the back panel attached. I actually started thinking, as I got about halfway through, probably should be using glue instead of just brad nails, because there's a chance that over time the wood moves and pulls those nails out. This is going in my own house, so I'll be able to monitor that, and if it does happen, I can pull it back apart and re-glue it. So if you guys make one of these, glue it, just to make sure. The only problem is, well, it's not a problem, I expected it, is I gotta trim this, so I'll probably trim both pieces so they're completely flush. And then I noticed this side actually ended up a little bit hanging off as well. So I will trim that side also. All right, there we go. Perfect. Well, I'm gonna cheat a little bit because I have the tools. and I can't find my connector for my 4-foot straight edges to hook together to run down the length of this door, nor can I find a board that's straight enough. But I do have a solution. The solution is this, which is a flush trim bit. Such a cool tool, I use it all the time. Basically what happens is this bearing rides on your piece that you want to trace. It's also called a trace bit. This one has one on the top and the bottom. So you can run this on that piece and the cutter will cut the other board flush. So then you end up with 2 flush boards. So let's get this thing put to work. All right, now it's all nice and flush all the way around. Still have to do one more thing with the router, which is cut the groove for that little thing. I don't even know where it's at. I'm gonna go find that, I'll be back. Moving into a new shop is kind of like moving into a house. You can't find anything that you packed, don't know where stuff is. Just like the connector for my straight edge, I can't find my dang router edge guide, but I have another solution. You guys remember the video I did a little ways back? If not, I'll link it below on the unusual uses of a biscuit joiner. We just found another one. I'm gonna cut this slot with the biscuit joiner. I may have to do like 2 passes, moving it a little bit, and it's just gotta be somewhere in the middle. You adjust the little deal on the floor wherever the slot is, so it doesn't matter a ton. That's probably about as deep as it needs to be right there, actually. So I think we're good. Just gonna make one more cleanup pass and then start painting. All right, now I'm gonna let this dry and go hang up the barn door hardware in the house. Now all I gotta do is install the rollers on the door and then we can go hang it up and see how it looks. When I said I wouldn't suggest this barn door kit, this is why. Look at this. Focus. There's no actual instructions. It's just measurements in metric. Took a while to figure out, but I did. So I'm gonna get these installed and then we can go check out what it looks like. I got the door here in the house where it's gonna go. I did a couple things off camera, including put on these stops and these little cam lock deals. These swivel in and out. So once we put it on, carefully, and you twist these in, and that prevents it from coming up off the track. So there's that stop. That stop fully covers the door, which is nice. I was not, however, able to put the guide in the floor because this floor is so unlevel, just like everything else in this old house. Everything's out of square and not level, so the floor actually comes up. That's level. I should have just measured from the floor and I could have used it, but that's level, the floor is not level. So when you close the door, it actually kind of comes together and pinches that. So I'll just leave it like this. It's more for looks anyway. It's probably not gonna get used all that much. We may add some hardware, I don't know. We'll leave that up to my girlfriend. She's the designer. So that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please check out this one right here, and we'll see you on the next one.